Hey everyone, Miss Rachel here with another episode of Science with God. Today's episode is called The Pressure of Temptation. Now, today's experiment I consider fairly dangerous as it does require the use of fire. So please, if you want to try this experiment at home, which you totally can, just make sure you have your parents help you. Honestly, if I still lived with my parents, I'd probably have them help me with this because I'm a little terrified of fire. But it's a really cool experiment, so we're gonna do it anyways. All right, what do we need? First, we need a glass jar. Mine's a little dirty because I tested the experiment beforehand, so it's got a little ash in it. But just a normal glass jar, it can be a mason jar, anything, just a clear glass jar. Then you need a balloon. Yet again, mine's a little dirty from my trial. This balloon, you need to fill it up with water. I used an orange balloon because while filming this, we are currently playing UT football and I have to support my team. Now, you want to fill the water balloon up with just enough water that it's not gonna, you can't push it into the jar. It's a little bit bigger than the opening of the jar. Now, we also need a piece of paper that we're going to light on fire. Obviously a lighter or a match or something to start the fire, which don't forget, you need your parents' help. And then we also need a straw. And this straw is a reusable straw. You need one that's not like those little cheap disposable ones. You don't want it to be able to collapse when you squeeze it. You want it to be able to hold its shape. So in our experiment, everything here is gonna represent something. So this jar is going to represent the world. So right now, it's dirty, but it's just an empty world. Now the paper and the fire, when I do that, that's gonna be sin and temptation, okay? Now, the orange balloon, that's going to represent us, the people of the world, any person. And the straw is going to represent God. And this will all make sense once we do the experiment. Hi, Hermione. Hermione wants to help apparently. I'm gonna push her off here in a second because I don't want to catch her on fire. She might not appreciate that. Come here, Hermione. All right, so before we start this experiment, does anybody know, what is temptation? Does anybody know what temptation is? Well, temptation, I mean, all of us are tempted, okay? Everybody in this world is tempted, and temptation is something that is trying to pull us away from God, pull us to do something that we know we shouldn't be doing, that isn't God's will, but it causes so much pressure on us, it just pulls us in. So, you know, temptation can be from anything, really. It could be from TV shows, movies, or even your friends, you know. Like, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about, you know, you might be tempted to steal something from a store. Like, maybe you're at the mall with a friend and your friend's like, oh, let's just steal this little lip gloss. It's only like 99 cents. It's fine. It's no big deal. But would that be God's will? Does he want us to steal? No. So in that case, your friend is tempting you to do something that you know is wrong. So, like I said again in this experiment, the jar is the world. This piece of paper in the fire is the temptation. So, what we're gonna do, and this is the part that scares me because it requires fire, so ask your parents for help. We're going to light this paper on fire, and then we're gonna drop it into the jar. And right after we do that, once the little flaming paper's in here, we're gonna stick our balloon on top, and we're gonna see what happens, okay? Let me remove my cat real quick so she doesn't get in the way. All right. So let's see what happens. Got my paper in here and I'm gonna set it on fire. And drop it in there, and then we put our balloon on. Make sure it gets good contact on the top of the jar. Whoop. And then see what happens. Whoop. It got pulled into the jar. Pretty cool, right? I think it's pretty cool. So the fire and the paper in the jar that's the world, that created so much pressure on our little orange balloon person that little balloon person got sucked into the world. So they just got dragged into the temptation. Now, say little bit of smoke here. Say we want to get out of the world, get away from our temptation. Do you think we'll be able to get out on our own? Let's see. Nope, I cannot get this balloon out. I can get it to start coming out, but I cannot get it all the way out. And now I gotta try to push him back in there. There we go. So, I'm going to read a verse for you. This is from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. It says, "There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above what you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it." So what does this verse mean? So we already know, we already talked about everybody is tempted. We're all tempted. Pretty much every day you're tempted by something, anything. So we're all tempted, but what this verse is saying is that God, He's never going to give us temptation that is too much for us, that we cannot handle. He won't give us something more than what we can handle. He also says in here, I lost it, that with the temptation also make a way to escape. So if we're followers of Jesus Christ, if we believe in Jesus Christ and follow Him, God will help us be able to escape that pressure of temptation. So if we're sucked into temptation, with His help through prayer and believing in Him and following Him, He will allow us to be able to get out of that temptation. So, like I said, this straw represents God. So I'm gonna try to get the little knot on our little balloon person here again. And yet again, I'm gonna show you I can't pull the balloon out. So I'm going to use this straw, stick it in here, and then we're gonna try to pull the balloon out without losing the straw. And whoop, I hit Flanagan with the straw, but our little balloon person popped right out of the jar. So with the straw, which represents God, I had no problem pulling our little balloon person back out of this world. So now, let's talk about the physics of this, the science behind why did this experiment work? Well, it's fairly simple, and it all has to do with air pressure. So, when we just have this regular jar here, the pressure of the air inside the jar is the same as the pressure out here, all around me. Now, when we put the balloon on here, yet again the pressure is still equal. But if we try to force this balloon in, none of the air can escape out of the jar. So no air can move out to make room for this balloon. That's why we can't push it in. Now, when we set a fire inside the jar, that's going to heat up the air. And when air gets warm, the molecules that make up the air, they just spread really far apart. So when we start that fire, actually a lot of the molecules of the air, they are escaping out of the jar because all those molecules are spreading really far apart. It takes up a lot more room. So then we put the balloon on top of here, and when we do that, that causes the fire to go out. And when the fire goes out, the air starts to cool. And when the air starts to cool, all those molecules that are really, really far apart, they start coming a lot closer together. And because this balloon is on here, yet again, air can't get pulled in to the jar, so this creates a big open space. And because of that, it creates a vacuum effect that sucks the balloon in. Now, once we have the balloon in the jar, why can't we get it out? Yet again, it still has to do with pressure. Because no air is allowed to move between the jar and the outside when we're trying to pull out the balloon, we just physically cannot pull it out. But when we use straw, which I lost it, but when we put the straw in there, that allows air to move between the outside of the jar and the inside of the jar. And because that, we can easily remove the balloon. Now, let's review what we talked about in this lesson. We talked about temptation, right? Like I said, everybody is tempted. I'm tempted, you're tempted, your parents are tempted. Everybody is tempted. My cats are tempted. No, they're not people, but they are tempted by food. Let me tell you, all they care about is food. So Everybody is tempted to do things that we know is wrong, that we should not do. But remember our Bible verse, 1 Corinthians 10:13, that told us that God will never tempt us with more than we can handle. And if we are tempted, if we're followers of Jesus Christ, He's always going to provide a way for us to get out of that temptation, to escape that temptation, and get back on the right path with God. I hope you all enjoyed this lesson. Yet again, if you try it at home, please have your parents help you. I hope you had a great time, and I'll see you again later.